I can't tell you how heartwarming it is to see so many angels. Not many people at my time of life can look back and say with so much profound gratitude, thank you. I thank all of you, and I thank Master for what he has given to you through me. And I have no regrets at all. I feel that everything has been a step upward, and everything has been cause for great celebration. And I thank you all for coming here and celebrating this 60th anniversary with me. I think the music has been a very important part of our ministry, and I would urge you all to get into it and sing with this choir. It's a pretty big choir right now, but I think it would help all of you in your attunement. I thought today that I would talk about things that I have learned from my guru. Thought it might be useful for all of us. One thing that I mentioned yesterday, and I've been saying it lately, I feel as if I were sort of fading out. And Miriam said that she's heard this statement made by other people who were very anemic, and she suspects this has been my problem. I know that when my blood hemoglobin went down to 7, they had to give me 2 transfusions in the hospital. And at this time it went down to 8, and I've just been taking some liquid things, but she thinks maybe I need blood transfusion. That would be good news if that was it, because maybe I can squeeze a little more out of this body still. Who knows? One thing that I found in living with Master was that it was not intellectual learning. It was recognition. He would state truths in such a way that you didn't feel like taking notes and memorizing them. He would reach your soul, and your soul would rise in recognition to whatever level you were capable of reaching, so that what he would say to a group of people might be understood by them in different ways. I'll give you one example, which is fairly obvious, but one time he looked at Brahmachari Oliver, who was 55 or so when he came, and he said to him, "You have clear sailing." And all the other monks present, obviously their thought was, what about me? And he said, "Well, you will all have clear sailing if you stay in tune." And afterwards they were all, several of them were gathering together saying, "Did you hear him? He said we'd have clear sailing." I didn't want to correct them, but he did say, "if you stay in tune," and they didn't all stay in tune. People will hear what they want to hear from the guru, and that's not always what he's saying. You have to listen very carefully. In that case, it didn't seem like it took great care to understand what he really meant. But I did find that many times he would say things in very subtle ways. He'd speak to me, and I suppose it would happen with other people too, in such a way that even when there was a crowd, I knew he was speaking to me. And I remember one time he said something, and I mentally thanked him. He looked at me briefly and smiled and went on. But he talked to us as individuals, not just to a crowd. And all learning must be this way. You who teach on Ananda's behalf and Master's behalf should remember this truth, that you can help people to recognize truth, but you can't drive it into them with a hammer and a nail. You must understand that people will only understand what they will and receive what they are able and capable of receiving according to their own life experience, according to their own maturity, according to a lot of different things. So don't feel that you've got to hammer your points home. Touch on them lightly. And those who are ready to get them will get them, and the others who aren't ready, so let it go. Another thing that he taught me was to be true to myself. Well, I always was true to myself, but he made me more so. When I met him, I don't suppose it's possible to me be more desperate than I was to be accepted. I felt that I'd tried everything and nothing worked. And his, I knew would work. I knew it was for me. And he told me, I give you my unconditional love. That was an incredible thing to say, and he asked that of me, and I offered it to him. And then he also asked me for my unconditional obedience. As desperate as I was, I still had to ask him, what if I think sometime you're wrong? I had to be honest. And he answered me saying, I will never ask of you anything that God does not tell me to ask you. And I accepted that. So I gave him my unconditional obedience. And in giving him that, I found that many times it was not convenient to do what he said. But I found always that it worked. And since he's gone, I have accepted. When SRF threw me out on my ear, that's the only way you can put it, with curses, I couldn't understand how they would do it. I was so dedicated. But they didn't. I think it was this is what Satya Sai Baba said to me. It was just envy and jealousy. I think it was that. Nonetheless, they when they did throw me out, Anandamayi Ma sent me a letter, a message, saying, take this as your guru's kripa, his grace. Now, grace, that's the one word I can't accept. But I found it was true. It was the greatest thing that could have happened to me. It made it possible for me to do the work that Master had given me to do. He had told me to do. And I had not seen. How could I write the books he told me to write? I'd never be given the time to write them. I'd never be published if I did write them. I just couldn't see how it would happen. And I couldn't see how so many things would happen that have happened since then. So yes, it was the greatest blessing of my life. When you try to do God's will, you will find that He will help you in ways that may not be pleasing, but it will always be right. I've never known it to fail. Sometimes He didn't give me what I wanted, but He gave me what I really wanted, because I wanted truth, and what He gave me helped me to come closer to truth. Many people, many fellow disciples would say to me, don't you think you should be so-and-so? Don't you think you should be so-and-so? He never said that to me. He never said, don't you think you ought to be so-and-so? He told me what he felt I should do, and I did it. But he allowed me to be true to myself. This is a very great boon for a teacher to give to people, to allow each person to be himself, as eccentric as he would be. But when it becomes an institution, they tend to try to mold you into one form and make you toe that line. I don't want to see Ananda ever do that. I glory in the fact that we're a bunch of eccentrics. We're not only eccentric, we have great love for each other, and this is a wonderful gift. The harmony that I see here, I have not seen anywhere in ashrams or anywhere in this world. That is a great blessing, and I give that credit to Master too. But I haven't seen all his disciples being in that harmony, and so I have to say that it's something he's done through me too. He allowed me to be myself, and in doing so, he's helped me to understand that I have to allow all of you to be yourselves. That's the only, you'll never know, you'll never have anyone to work with but your own ego. Let's face it, you can't get away from it, so you might as well make the best of it. The truth is you can get away from it ultimately, and that's something else that he taught me. But you get away from it by aspiring to higher things. He told me to grow a beard, and Actually, when I was letting it grow too long, he actually took the time to trim it himself. And when some of the other monks began growing beards, he said, "I don't shave them off. I don't want my boys looking like wild men." But apparently, he didn't mind one wild man in the crowd, and because I had a beard at a time when nobody grew beards, people would sometimes call out Fidel Castro. And the Masons decided that I looked like Jesus Christ. And so they had me pose at Gethsemane. And all I had to do at this Masonic installation of officers was sit by this rock and heave a sigh every now and then. But afterwards, Master said, several of them said that I looked like Jesus Christ. And I sort of self-deprecatingly said, well, I'd much rather be like him than look like him. And I expected him to laugh. He didn't. He said, that will come. He always saw us in our highest potential. He never would laugh at our weaknesses or laugh with us in our self-deprecation. This is a fault of mine, as he made clear, but it's still a fault. I can't help it. I do tend to deprecate myself, and I think it's got its positive sides. It keeps me humble. But at the same time, I know one time the monks always called me Don, and my master, however, called me Walter. And I was sort of puzzled why he called me Walter. But I asked him one time, sir, would you like the other monks to call me Don or Walter? He said they should call you Reverend Walter. I hastily dropped the subject. Nonetheless, he wanted us to accept our proper dignity. I've never been able to do that. This is my weakness, and I ask your apology, but there you have it. And he always saw the highest in us. We have to see ourselves as potential saints. He said a saint is a sinner who never gave up. And no matter how many faults a person had, he would always try to help them to shoot for the highest goal. Sometimes he could be very stern. I remember him saying to Boone one time that if you don't make it in this life, it'll take you, if you leave this work, it'll take you another 200 or 700 lives to reach this point. That's quite a frightening statement. And Boone did leave. One time he asked Master, will I ever leave this path? Master answered obliquely. He said, how could you? Everyone in the world is on the spiritual path. But at the same time, some are working to get off of it, and others are working to burrow themselves deeper. Like that net that the fisherman throws, and some fish, instead of leaping out of the net, burrow deeper into it. They'll get caught. And Boone, unfortunately, it's his own weakness. But he has said, I've fallen. Master said, never say you have fallen. Never say you have failed. Always you can make one more effort, but if you say that you've failed, it will be true for this life. So never accept failure. A saint is a sinner who never gave up. Always cling to that aspect of your being which has brought you here. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have some divine aspiration. When Norman said to him once, sir, I don't think I have very good karma, Master said, remember this, it takes very, very, very good karma even to want to know God. So work with that good karma. Don't worry about the bad karma. It's very important. Be positive. One time, when I first came to Encinitas, this was the 11th of September it was the 12th of September, but before I went up to Hollywood to meet Master. And I met Sister Gyanamata. I was dressed all in white because I thought that's how people dressed in California, in Palm Beach suits. but California isn't Florida. And so Sister Gyanamata's first impression was that I must be a serviceman come to check on the water that they'd ordered to come. And I got quite offended with her and got sort of upset because here so many churches have these little old ladies gathered around who have nothing better to do with their lives than clog the drains, as far as I could see. And she told me that Master was lecturing in Hollywood, and I was so ignorant of the whole scene here that I thought Hollywood was nothing but studio lots. I wondered how there could be a church in Hollywood. I didn't realize it was a big city. But anyway, I took the bus up, and that's when I met Master, and he accepted me. But I remember in the bus I was thinking of her again with sort of indignation, and I remembered her eyes, and they had been very deep. And I suddenly realized she was much more than I had understood. And I asked for forgiveness mentally. And the moment I mentally asked for forgiveness, I knew I was accepted. I don't know how I knew, but I did know. And I mentioned to Master this story one time, and I talked about my first impression of her. And he said, "Why do you be negative like that?" And I said, "Am I negative, sir?" He said, "No, you're very positive, but you have some negativity. Don't be negative at all." And this was true because of my over-intellectuality. I had a tendency always to look for both sides. And he helped me to break that. I found that the answer to everything is to have a positive attitude. Look for the best. This is what I saw in him. Many people I knew focused on his personality. Norman would sort of almost as if, isn't he cute for being like this? He loved him for that, but he didn't follow him. Master would tell him things and he'd just say, "Isn't he cute?" but wouldn't do what he said. And I didn't think of him as a personality at all. I'd look into those eyes. I'd see nothing, no ego at all there. There was just this absence of, he never would tell his actual age because he said, "I have no age." This is how I feel when I look at pictures of myself at the age of 4. It's the same old man there, same old fellow. I don't have an age. I feel timeless. But that's what he urged us to learn to do. Don't think of yourself in terms of age, because this same soul will keep coming back into new bodies. And when I look at groups of people nowadays, even in public, in train stations and so on, I see so many people I know. It's very interesting. I was at a We the People program in India on television a few 2 or 3 years ago, and there were about 100 people there. They all looked like old friends and family members. I couldn't explain it, but they did. And many of you, I've told you, you look like old friends. But we come again and again until finally we understand what it's all about. How long have we been coming? I asked Master that one time. Norman had a vision of him as on the island of Mu, long before Atlantis, 80,000 years ago. This is the supposed story of it, at least. And I was kind of horrified. Norman had all these visions. I never had any visions. I remember one time seeing a large green face there suddenly. But Master told me God was keeping these things from me because you were a doubter in your last life. And so you have to go in apparent dryness, but it hasn't been dryness. It's been so sweet. This is all that matters, that His love and bliss are with me. But anyway, this time I said to Master, "Have I been your disciple for thousands of years?" He answered, "It has been a long time, that's all I'll say." I said, I didn't want to be thought think myself the only laggard in the crowd. And I said, well, does it always take that long? He said, oh yes, desire for name and fame and this thing and that thing, take them away time and again. And I suppose that was my problem. I must have looked for name and fame. I know I've been a king, I know I've been a leader, I know I've had fame, and I have reached the point in this life where it means absolutely nothing to me. People can throw brickbats at me, or they can say that I'm the greatest person in the world, and it means nothing to me. First of all, I know that most people are wrong most of the time. So what does it matter? And if they're right, so what does it matter? We've all got to reach the point where we get out of this blasted mess. But the thing is that Master always talked to our souls. And yes, it takes a long time. But he said, don't focus on this personality. And I understood what he meant. I know that Dayamata, every time she's told me a story of Master, it's always been made to make her look good. I haven't cared for that kind of story. There are many stories I've told about him. Some of them may make me look good. Some of them may make me look bad. It doesn't matter. I'm so happy that he could correct me. Many people, when you make a mistake, you sort of, I hope God didn't see that. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to know everything about me. And this focus on personality, it was a struggle for me to understand, because in a way he's not at all a personality. He's the infinite consciousness come in that form. But he taught me a lesson that way too. One time I was sitting half the distance between me and Jyotish. I was standing and he was that close to me, or even closer. And I was standing there, looking at him and thinking, but he's not this person, he's everywhere. And he came over and gave me an apple with a little twinkle in his eye, because he wanted me to understand that he's also a person. He's not a non-person. It's through his humanity that we can understand how we should be. It's through his humanity that we can understand those aspects of God that will mean something to us. And so the personality of the Guru, it's not based on likes and dislikes. It's not based on attachments and self-definition or anything like that. Nonetheless, that as Arjuna, when he was with Krishna, in the 11th chapter, he had that vision of the cosmic vision of Krishna, and it describes him as having 1,000 feet and 1,000 heads and so on. And people have tried to draw images of this which are perfectly ridiculous. What it meant is simply that the divine consciousness is in all bodies, in all minds, in everything. But that infinite consciousness does take on a personality. And Arjuna, after that experience, he said, show me yourself in your own human form. I long to see that again. And this is the relationship of disciple and guru. It's both human and non-human. And the human has to be sanctified. You don't get rid of human love by hating it. You get rid of it by purifying it, by seeing it in its highest octave. And to me, the highest octave of human love is the love of disciple and guru. And that unconditional love that he gave me, that he gives to all of us in a sense. But when he gives that promise, it's something special. It means that I'll hang on to you until you find what you're looking for, you find God. But what greater promise could there be? Shankaracharya said, the Adi Shankaracharya, that in all the three worlds, causal, astral, physical, the greatest possible blessing is to have a true guru. The guru doesn't make you a disciple, he makes you one with himself. This is the goal of the spiritual path. You don't remain forever subject. You become one with God. You can't be greater than that. This is the goal of the spiritual path, to realize that you are he. and that this little ego that you're living in and that you see that you take so seriously, it means nothing at all. You are that infinite one. And when the veils are all lifted and you see that, it's not that you lose your ego, but it becomes sanctified, so that you always know that God is working through your ego, and it's not you who are doing it. Master's humor, I used to be sort of sarcastic. I enjoyed sarcasm, not for the sake of hurting other people, but to be clever. This was my ego and my fault. But I noticed that Master was never sarcastic. He was always kindly. He never laughed at anybody, but he had a great sense of humor, and he often would laugh with people. But in this I have also helped, I think, to share with Ananda people too. We love laughter, we love humor, but we love to do it kindly. Because we're all, the reason, and this is what Master helped me to understand too, the reason that we should all love everybody is that everybody in the world is seeking what we're seeking. They're all seeking that divine bliss. And they don't know it, and so they seek it in wrong ways. And they seek it even through cruelty and through hurting other people. But ultimately, everybody is seeking that. And sooner or later, everybody must reach that point where they understand that this is what they are seeking. And so what we should do is help them. Even if they try to hurt us, help them to understand. Forgive them. Love them. It'll drive them up the wall. But better that revenge than any other. Because in that, they come to understand finally what they really wanted and what they really want. Master told me to listen to others. He taught me that. I remember one time he told me a story, and I anticipated his answer and gave it for him. And he just calmly went on and gave it for himself and looked at me like this. And I understand I should not be bristling with my own opinions. Let him listen to other people. Listen to him. What he had to say was, in fact, a little different from what I had proposed for him. But don't jump in there and bristle with your opinions. Always listen to what other people have to say before you answer. So many times people start to talk, oh yeah, I'd have heard that one before. Well, you don't know that you have. And what I always say is, no, you don't always say anything. Everything you say should be in the moment for the person that you're talking to. And for the moment you're talking in, it's very important. He was very positive. He put me in charge of the monks when I'd been with him only a year, and I was only 23. And that was young. There were many people who were a lot older than I. And I felt embarrassed to ask anything of them and didn't really do much in being in charge. But a year later, he definitely gave me more insistent that I take charge of them, and I finally took it seriously. He bought Mount Washington in 1925, but until 1948, when I came, the monks had not been organized. The nuns had not been organized. He'd been too busy doing other things. So it was really I who organized the monks, and through the monks, the nuns also. But his way of telling me to organize, this is something you hear quite the opposite from people again and again in the SRF. He gave us the blueprint, they say. He didn't give us the blueprint. He said it again and again, the blueprint is in the ether. What I found was that it was through my attunement with him that I knew what I had to do. He would sometimes make little suggestions here or there, or I'd ask him a question, and he'd say, well, more this way than that way. But he didn't tell me. It was all through hints, through very subtle suggestions, and through my having to grasp what he was telling me and understand from within what he wanted. And this is how I've built Ananda, and how I've tried to get people ask me, what do you see as the blueprint for Ananda? I said, God will show us. He shows us every step of the way, which way we should go. If you're committed to going north, God's will may be when you reach the next corner to turn south or east or something. It isn't like that. God's will is not a fixed and determined thing. It depends on the moment. It depends on the opportunities. It depends on what people are ready for. So many things determine it. And he himself would look for signs. I remember I was to go to India with him for 3 years in a row. And the last year, of course, was prevented by his Mahasamadhi. But the next year, the 51 I was to go, he had told me, don't tell anybody. And Bernard tricked me and made me think that he knew. And I told him, and Bernard did not know. He only guessed. And he went to Master and he said, you're leaving me in this condition. And Master took that as Divine Mother's sign that he couldn't go that year. Well, he told me to be more careful what I talk about. Most of his training of me was not so much for myself as for teaching other people. And one of his ways, however, of teaching, as I said, was very positive. People have often talked about how stern a disciplinarian was, how strict he was, how he wouldn't let anything go wrong. I remember one time he entered the monks' dining room. Well, the monks' dining room was... women are needed on the scene. It was an absolute mess. And he looked around at these unwashed dishes and dirty table and everything, and he sat down. He said, well, it might be worse. But he always looked in a positive way at everything, and he always helped us to encourage us in a positive way to be better than we were, to try to strive to be better, and to see the goodness in people. I was amazed. One time, Herb Jeffries, you may know his name. I suspect he's not living any longer, but I saw him some years ago in Los Angeles. He was quite an old man there. He was a black singer, but he looked more white than black, actually, anyway, because he had some black blood in him. He identified with that. Anyway, he was a very famous singer. He sang with Duke Ellington and so on. And he came to Master. And whenever he came to Master, he was all enthusiasm. I never saw a more enthusiastic person. But then Master would have an assignment for me to teach him meditation techniques at the church. And he wouldn't show up. And after this happened the third time, I got fed up with the guy. I thought, is he just coming here for glory? And the next time Master saw him, I was always there when Master saw him. I wouldn't even look at him. And he, Master later said, how dry you were with him. How many people would be left here if I had been so judgmental of them? And he showed me, be forgiving, be loving, give everybody a chance to improve. And in fact, when Herb Jeffries came to my talk in Los Angeles several years ago, he still loves Master, he's still with him. He wouldn't be with him if Master had taken him down. He still has practiced his Kriya, he still is faithful in his way, but it's a worthwhile way because it's what he can do. So always look for the good in people. Everybody is a mixture. As Babaji said to Sri Yukteswar, the world of Maya is a mixture of sand and sugar. Be like the wise ant that takes the sugar and leaves the sand. You will see that in this way you will grow, but you will feed on what you see in other people. I remember him saying to Anandamayi one time that he said, whenever you remember this, whenever you see wrong with people, it's wrong with you. When you are right, everything is right because you see God there. It doesn't mean that you're blind. It doesn't mean that you don't see people's faults, but you see them struggling in their way, and you see the good in them and try to help feed that good. You will gain a lot more good, as they say. More flies are caught with honey than with vinegar. And so you can catch people's delusions and help them out of them if you look for their goodness. Otherwise, their ego gets in and they say, "What do you mean?" And you're another, and they erect defenses, which makes it impossible for them to get out of those darknesses. Master always gave credit to his line of gurus, and I think this is what we should always do. Somebody asked him once, "Why are you teaching the Gita and the Bible especially?" And his answer was, "This is what Babaji wanted me to do." It's a very interesting thing in Autobiography of a Yogi, that chapter on the resurrection of Sri Yukteswar, where Sri Yukteswar describes the astral world and the causal world and so on. And Master, this happened when in 1936, after he'd left his body, and he materialized to Master and told him these things, and Master was just so awestruck, according to the autobiography, that he was learning these wonderful things from his guru. In 1932, he had made those same descriptions of the astral world. He knew it all, but he always gave credit to the gurus. This is something that I think is a very lovely thing in the life of Arjuna and in the life of Master. When you read the autobiography of a yogi, you get this idea of this humble seeker coming, knowing nothing, and just in awe of all these things that he's learned from all these teachers. He told us at the end of his life that all those teachers he would go to as a young man and as a young boy, he said they were always trying to learn from me. I kept trying to learn from them something, and they called him Chota Mahashai, which he translated as Little Sir. But Mahashai means great soul. They saw that he was a great soul, and they kept asking him for instruction. He got very frustrated, but he never would talk like that. He always put himself that way. This is where he told us that he was Arjuna in the last life. And you see the same thing in Arjuna, in the Gita. Arjuna is this humble devotee at the feet of Krishna, learning these great truths and being scolded by Krishna for wanting to give up and everything. But he was acting on behalf of the devotee. And Arjuna and Master both acted on behalf of you and me, perfectly happy to look foolish in order to help us to grow. But it's a beautiful thing. Arjuna was a realized master, and I think Master has been a liberated soul for many, many lives. He said in his poem, rather, in the God's Boatman, he said, "I will come back if need be 1,000,000,000 times, as long as there is one stray brother left crying by the wayside." And when you think of what that means, you wonder how many times has he come back already. I think many times. When he said, "I'd been his disciple for a long time," that meant something. We have to understand that we are actually tied to a very, very high line of gurus who it's their duty to take care of this planet. This is my feeling. Master said that Lahiri Mahasaya was Raja Janaka, who was the great king master in Raja Rishi in ancient India. And he said that Arjuna was himself. He said that Babaji was Krishna. And I think that, as Krishna said, that you and I have been together many, many times to Arjuna. And it is said that Krishna and Arjuna in some past life that was ancient in those times were Nara and Narayan. And Narayan was his disciple, but Satan at that time tried to tempt him by materializing a beautiful woman. And Narayan just materialized 100 beautiful women. Satan just decided he better give up. They've been masters for a long time. And yet I have noticed that this has been Master's role. and Arjuna's role, and who knows how long before that, to act on the part of the disciples to help them to grow. And this is what I noticed about Master, that he was self-deprecating in a sense, but he never allowed me to be. Whenever I would say, like that thing about, well, I wish I would be more like Jesus, not just look like him, he said that, well, come. He always tried, or when I wanted to know, should I say Walter or Don, Reverend Walter. He wanted me to accept my position of authority among the monks and of a certain level of understanding that people would look up to and so on, because I had it, but I have never accepted it. And I think part of it is plain spiritual laziness. If I don't have to be that, then it doesn't matter that I have to, if I'm imperfect. That's spiritual laziness, let's face it. But anyway, he tried, and you all have to help me to try. One time I remember, because he would always, inwardly, he would always be the divine self. One time Norman said to him, whenever I see you, I see the Divine Mother. And Master, when he saw him next, he didn't say, oh, don't say that. He just tapped him with his cane. He said, then behave accordingly. He knew that it was the Divine Mother working through him. And it's important that we see this, and that we too, teaching other people, that we accept that our role is to serve not as egos, but as the divine working through us. And the more we allow God to work through us, the more we find that he can do so. So don't concentrate on your faults. Don't concentrate on yourself. You're the big obstacle. So think of him and let him talk through you and speak with his dignity. It's important. There was a master, as I said, often used to correct me in what I would say to other people. I've told you the story one time of I was at a Beverly Hills bar mitzvah, and I'm not Jewish by birth, and I've never been in a synagogue, but I did the yoga postures, and they wanted me to perform the yoga postures for them. And later on, one of these Beverly Hills psychiatrists grabbed me and grilled me. And I don't like to type people, but I have to say that if anybody's a materialist, it would be a Jewish Beverly Hills psychiatrist. And he was just putting down everything I was standing for, and so I told him a few miracles I had seen. And I could see in his mind that he was thinking, well, let's see, next Wednesday perhaps I could see this patient at 10 o'clock. And it didn't make any impression on him. Anyway, I saw Master a few days later, and I had just finished serving lunch to some guests, and after they had left, we would often sit at the table, and he would talk to me. And he paused in the moment, for a moment in his brief conversation, and he said, you know, when you're with skeptics and materialists, don't talk of miracles. I said, you knew? He said, I know every thought you think. That's quite a statement to make. But he showed it to me again and again. There was one time in Hollywood Church, there was one man there who was very flattering by nature. And I said that I was going to be giving the class next Wednesday. And so he said, well, I'll be sure to be there. Well, I knew he didn't mean it. It wasn't because I would be there. He'd be there anyway. And I didn't want to accept this praise. And so I just said, well, would you check everybody's pockets for garbage when they come? So don't throw it at me. Master told me a few days later at the same situation. He said, when you're talking to congregation members, don't talk about garbage. But you know, I was happy for him to know every thought. There was no thought that I didn't want him to come in. If it was a wrong thought, all the better. Because if you give all those thoughts to God, then he can cure you. But if you try to hold them to yourself, you're affirming your ego. So any mistake you make, anytime you say something wrong, anytime you do something wrong, just say, God, you know I'm trying to be good. Help me to be better. He's on your side. There was some high school performance, and some girl up there was just quaking with nervousness, and somebody called out from the audience, and he said, don't worry, Julie, we're all on your side. And that's what it is. God is on our side. He wants us to win. And when we make mistakes, he wants to help us. But remember that divine grace, and this is something that Master showed us, it's there all the time. When Debbie Mukherjee one time was joking about something, and Master said, you're always joking and light-minded and keeping the others light-minded. Can't you be more serious? And Debbie said, well, I want to be, sir, but how can I do so without your blessings? Master said, my blessings are there all the time. God's blessings are there. It's your blessings that are lacking. So he made us understand that we must make the effort to change. We can't expect God to do it for us. And I've come up with the image of the sunlight on the side of a building. It will go into all the rooms if the curtains are parted. But if the curtains are drawn shut, it can't come in. So God's grace is always there. He always wants to help us. But if we shut him out, as he said, as Sister Ganamata is quoted in saying in one of her letters, if you keep me out, how can I come in? Don't hide from him. Open yourself to him. Ask him to guide you in when you make mistakes. Open those curtains wide. It's only then that the Son of Grace can come. And don't think that grace will only be there if he likes your baby blue eyes or whatever. He loves all of us unconditionally. But he wants us to make the right effort. And the right effort is, most of all, opening ourselves to him. I remember the one thing, when Master was in church, he would talk about community. He would talk about the need for communities. He'd talk about general teachings. With us disciples, the most important thing he kept hammering on was be in tune, be in tune. As it says in the Bible, as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God. Receiving Christ and receiving the Guru doesn't mean, yes, I'm a disciple. Yes, I follow. Yes, I'm a member of this church. It means opening your heart to him and asking him to take charge of your life, to guide your thoughts. I will reason, Master said to pray. I will will. I will reason, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. We have to act, we have to will, we have to reason, but yes, we should always ask God to show us what he wants for us. And bit by bit, even those faults which seem to you impossible to overcome. And this is one of the strange tricks of Maya, that when you're in a delusion, it doesn't seem that you'll ever get out of it. This is the story of the Bhagavad Gita, that Arjuna is saying, how can I kill these relatives of mine? All your personality traits are qualities of your own personality. And anger and greed and liking for this person and disliking for that person, all these are like different personalities or different members of different citizens, you might say, in your great nation of consciousness. And Arjuna is saying to Krishna, how can I kill these? They're my own relatives. I know I'm supposed to because they're on the wrong side, but they're my own. How can I kill them? And Krishna says in the second chapter, don't worry, because there is no death. When they die, they only go to new forms. But he's saying more than that, and this is the deeper teaching of the Gita, which Yogananda helped us also to understand. Any quality, negative quality that you overcome, it isn't that you lose. This is what Maya tells us. I'll be killing some of myself if I do this. You're not killing yourself. It will be reborn. The same energy that went toward anger will go toward peace. The same energy that went toward lust will grow toward universal love. The same energy that went toward lack of forgiveness and hatred will go toward kindness and forgiveness. All these qualities are not you. They are just little traits that you've assumed for a while, but never identify with them. Never say, well, I can't help it, that's the kind of fellow I am. You can help it. And the worst sinner, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, if he will steadfastly meditate and seek me, will find me. Count him among the good. Consider him a saint already. Remember, a saint is a sinner who never gave up. And I would say that this has been something, perhaps the most important thing that he has given me. There have been times when I felt discouraged. There have been times when I thought, how can I possibly? But always I've remembered that saying, and I've tried. And the wonderful thing about every delusion that you've got is that when you're over it, you just wonder what all the excitement was. You see that it's completely unreal. I remember I used to have a lot of intellectual pride. I could out-argue anybody, and I was proud of it. This was why I tended to be sarcastic, which I'm not now. But I remember one night, and I think many of you have heard me tell this story, I got so tired of this quality. And I just, with great willpower, just threw this quality at Master. And I said, you take it, I don't want it. I'm finished with it. And suddenly, I felt free, and I've felt free ever since. It was an amazing experience for me. But it's like somebody who was a drunkard. And one time he felt inclined to go to the cupboard and take some more alcohol. And he got so angry with himself that he took all those bottles and threw them on the pavement and broke them. And in that anger, he overcame. Sometimes you have to do violence to yourself. And in this case, it worked. And for me, too. It worked for him and it worked for me. And I remember leaving my meditation that day and seeing Master, and I went for his blessing, and he tapped me on the head. He said, very good. But one time he was talking about how many of the ministers had fallen due to ego. And I said, sir, that's why I don't want to be a minister. I don't want to fall from ego. And he looked very serious. He looked at the ground. He said, you will never fall due to ego. And I see that that's basically true. It's something that when you've overcome something, you just wonder what the excitement was about. You see that it just doesn't exist. So don't ever give up, and don't feel that I'm hopeless, that I can't overcome this trait or that trait. Remember that sooner or later you have to be like Babaji. One time, because you remember how he spoke of Babaji, how great he was and everything, but he said to me one time of the different saints in Autobiography of a Yogi, only two were fully liberated, Paramhansa and Ram Gopal Mojumdar. And I said, what about Anandamayi Ma? What about the levitating saint? What about? He said, not yet. They've all attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi, but they still have some qualities still to overcome. Not their qualities, but their past lives. When you reach Nirvikalpa Samadhi, you remember all those past lives that you were, as I've said, as an instant image to come to mind, but a pirate or a businessman or a pauper or all sorts of things. Master wrote in one of his poems how he remembered being a wealthy man and then a pauper. I remember in that because he said, money is not necessarily a curse. It depends on how you use it. If you use it for the welfare of others, then you grow spiritually, and it's a great blessing. If you use it just for yourself, then it becomes a misfortune. And I remember coming out of Howrah station, train station, outside Calcutta, across the river, across the bridge, and I saw a group of gypsies there, and one of them was a young girl about 12, and I could see she looked as if, what am I doing here? She looked like an incarnated queen who had had everything and lost it through selfishness, and she just couldn't accept that she was in that position, but she was. So we must understand that whatever we have, it's a blessing, but we must make it a blessing by offering it to other people and helping other people. I mentioned how Master knew all my thoughts. One time Boone said to me that he'd been chanting Om Guru, and all of a sudden he didn't feel his body anymore. And he finally had to ask Master to help him because he was working around a press. He was afraid he'd get his hand injured in a press or something. And so I thought, well, that's for me. So I began thinking, Master, Om Guru. Next time I saw Master, he said, well, are you up to some kind of mischief, Walter? I said, I don't think so, sir. You sure you're not up to some kind of mischief? And then he very lovingly bid me goodbye. But he knows every thought I'm thinking now. I remember one time I had not seen him for a little while, and I felt a deep sense of longing for him. And I took the car down, drove down to Encinitas, and I saw him. And he, as soon as he saw me, he knew. And he welcomed me with great love, and he asked me to get in the car with him and come up to the Hermitage and talked with me. He said, I have missed you. And I thought, what human love is so instantly requited and so perfectly as this love? I remember that same night, Dave, I can't think of his name right now. I know it perfectly well. But anyway, he and several of us were talking, and he was talking about some book he had read, and I lost a little of that feeling of attunement. And the next day I went to the church in San Diego and came up for Master's blessing, and when he saw me, he said, I have missed you. And I knew he was saying that as a slight reprimand, that I had fallen a little bit in my attunement, but he was always there. And how often I have remembered just that occasion to help me to understand that he loves me, no matter what I am or who I am. And he loves everybody in that same way. I sometimes would pray to him, help me to love you as you love me. And he said to me one time, how can the little cup hold the whole ocean? It can't. You have to become the ocean. You have to be able to absorb as much as the ocean can absorb, be that much of a receptor. And so it is that to love God as he loves us, we have to lose our egos and become one with him. But with Babaji, when he was talking about these different saints and how only a few had achieved that state, I said, well, what about Mataji? You said she's almost as great as he. And he said, well, that means she wasn't yet on his level of full liberation, but she must be by now. But that statement that anybody who was a little short of complete self-realization, complete siddha, or state of siddha or freedom, anybody who's short of that is short of the state of Babaji, meant that everybody who is in that state of complete freedom is the same as Babaji. It's outwardly that he gives this special devotion, humility, and so on too. But he knows he's one with that. And Babaji knows it. We all have to reach that state. you don't remain forever a subject. You become one with God, and you can't be anything greater than that. Jesus, when he said, "I and my Father are one," was scolded by the Jews because they said he was blaspheming for saying, "I and my Father are one." And Jesus did not answer saying that my Father says so and you'd better believe it or you'll go to hell. He said, "Don't your scriptures say, ye are gods?" He was saying that we are all the same. He was not born in this world, and the great masters are not born to help us to see how great they were. They come on earth to show us how great we are in potential. We must understand that that is our potential, and anything short of that potential means we're still in delusion. But it's only a delusion. It does not define you as you are. You are children of God, and sooner or later you must reach that understanding. And no one is greater than any other, and you can't be greater than God. All of them are equal in Him, and we must achieve that. Don't think that it's a sign of humility to say I'm no good. Always affirm that I have that potential within me. That's what the great masters trying to teach us, that what they try to teach us. I remember one thing, and that's why I say that I keep learning. I keep reflecting on my life with Master, things he said to me, things I've gained from him. Many times what I say comes from him inwardly. When I wrote the Whispers from Eternity, you might have thought it would take a long time to edit that book. It took me 2 weeks. And it took me 2 weeks in which I had many classes to give on the weekend. And still I was able to do it in 2 weeks. That has to be called a miracle. But somehow every sentence I looked at, I knew what to do. And if I had to take a word out, because there were too many words in the thing, it became top-heavy, I found that I could replace that word somewhere else. So it was just amazing to me that looking at it, I knew instantly what to do. And if you read this Whispers and compare it with the 1949 edition, you'll see that it's true to Master. When Osher was typing up the manuscript, and it looked like I'd made a mess of the manuscript, but when you read it all worked out, just read the same, it just was clean, that's all. I don't say that he said, but it was the sort of thing that he could have said, that the bird of paradise plowing through the deep mud of delusion, mixing metaphors that they don't mix. But when it's all cleaned out, because Master in his exuberance would just pour out himself into what he wrote, and I had to sort of tame it down to a level where we can accept it. But it was, my hearing aid went dead. Usually I remember to bring batteries, but have you been able to hear that noise? No. Okay, well, I've heard it. Anyway, it's just gone dead. So, anyway, one thing that just yesterday it came to my mind that when I met Master, Bernard was there in his white robe, and Master did like this. And I thought, why did he do that? I don't know Bernard. And I realized suddenly it's because Bernard was wearing a white robe, and I had my white Palm Beach suit. And I think he was saying that you will be a minister too. Rather than just comparing my robe to his, he was saying that this is what you will be. When I'd never heard of such a quick courtship as my meeting of Master. I met him, and half an hour later, I was a disciple. A week before, I had never known what the word guru meant, or karma, or dharma. I never heard of them. This was all completely Greek to me. And yet I read that book. I was very intellectual, but I doubted my reasoning. And as I say, used my reasoning to show how doubt-inspiring it is, how unreliable it is. And when I read Autobiography of a Yogi, I knew it was right. Many things offended me intellectually. All the miracles on page 8, I think. Lahiri Mahasaya's materializing in a wheat field to Master's father. It was just, I couldn't take it all in. Somebody living hundreds of years. I couldn't reject it, however, because I knew in my heart, this man knows the truth. And when I met him, I found that everything he said was true, and all those miracles. But it was my heart that recognized him. Don't be guided by reason. Reason is a tricky friend and a very dangerous enemy. Go by your heart's feelings, not your emotions, but offer your heart's feelings up to God. I have found again and again, if I want to know whether a thing is right or not, I offer it up to God, not to consult my emotions, which can be very tricky, but not only to consult my reason as scientists do. And scientists are changing their mind on basic issues every 10 years. But those people who have known God through all the centuries, in every race, in every country, in every culture, they've all said the same thing. No one has ever come up and said, well, for a change, my children, hate everybody. They've all said, love everybody. They're your own self. They've all said the same truths. And this is what I found with Master, that everything he said, in some way, there was some deep message in it. He expected us to intuit his meanings. He didn't explain himself. But if you were quick, you could catch. If you were deep, I found that many things that he would say, I've understood on different levels at different times. To give you a simple example, one time he asked me, why does the earth, what holds the earth close to the sun? What holds it in its circumambulation around the sun? And I said, I thought Master was asking for a lesson in astronomy. And I said, well, that's the gravitational pull of the earth and the sun holding them together. Then he said, what keeps the earth from spinning out into space? No, that's what he said. And then what he said, what keeps the earth from being pulled back into the sun in that case? And I said, well, it's that centrifugal force that makes it want to keep pulling away. And he smiled and didn't say anything. And I thought, well, if he wanted an astronomy lesson, okay. It was months later that I understood that he was talking allegorically about the soul and God. God and the natural pull of the soul is to merge back into him. But the ego keeps wanting to spin out. It has a centripetal force that makes us want to spin away from God. It's his grace that holds us. But how that little simple thing that he didn't even bother to explain. But over the years, I've come to understand it on deeper and deeper levels. And finally, I can't say that I've understood anything completely. I remember Tara saying to me, every time I think I've understood him, I realize he's much more. I've never made the mistake of thinking I could understand him. He's always in his presence. It seemed as if I was in the presence of God. But how can you understand somebody whose basic consciousness is infinite? It's like a little funnel here, and the top of the funnel spreads out to infinity. So don't think. I remember Bernard one time, I was asking Bernard, why does Master do things in certain ways? Is he trying to teach us organization? Organization, hell, all he ever does is disorganize. Well, that was his mistake, and it took him off the path. But I felt he must be teaching us something, and I've discovered that he did teach us that you don't organize things. You go by a flow, an intuitive flow that takes you much closer to the truth. And this is how I've built Ananda. But this thought that you can understand the Guru, it's a mistake, it's a delusion. You can never understand him until you're one with God. And then you understand how God plays. It's an indescribable thing. You can't understand it except by becoming that yourself. So I remember him saying to me one time, thank you. That's the spirit. I remember him saying to me one time, always remain in the self. Come down a little bit now and then to eat or talk for a bit, then go back into the self again. That's not the sort of advice you can take quickly. But I found over the years, it's what he was. He always was in the self. And it's what you become more and more as you live this teaching. And you find that your reality is something from your center to other people's center. And in that way you understand everything better. People have asked me how I've been able to do all the things I've done. I really haven't done them. But from my center, I've understood how they should be done, and he's done them through me. Don't ever get the thought, I have this talent, or I have this ability. Offer that talent up to God. You will find that it's amazing the things he can tell you, the things he can show you, how he can help you. And I would like, because my own nature is artistic, I would like people here to think that way. I don't mean you have to be that way, because we're all ourselves. But don't think that you will ever be a good artist as long as you think I'm a good artist. He is the real artist. He is the real artisan. He is the one who... I've often thought that handicrafts are a wonderful thing because you get the vibration of the person making it instead of just a factory-made object. But yet the vibration should also be there. When you make things, put your love into them. Don't think that I'm just making a thing. Put your vibrations into it. Master said when you lecture, put your vibrations into the words. Don't just think in terms of words. Your vibrations will change people much more than the words themselves will. And who you are is much more important than what you are. Be in tune inwardly. Master, as I said, always said, be in tune. He said to some of the disciples, a few of you will fall, but it needn't be if you would be in tune. So inwardly, keep chanting his name, asking him as the guru, what should I do, even in little things? And anytime you've made a mistake or have some weakness, say, God, I want to be good. Help me to be good. You'll find that his help will be there. Master talked a great deal about communities. This was something that I myself had planned. I think we're all born for a particular reason, and I think I was born to help him in his mission. Because at the age of 15, I was already thinking about communities and the importance of them, and I was all enthusiastic about it, and because I have a very enthusiastic nature, all my friends got enthusiastic about it too, until they found out that I was serious. Then they all fell off. But I didn't fall off. I was very serious about it until I realized that that's not going to give the world what it wants. What the world needs is God. And I began seeking God, and I didn't know how to seek him. But when I found Autobiography of a Yogi, as I said, I was desperate for help. I knew I needed help. I knew that I had not been getting the answers on my own. And by attunement with him, I found at least some answers in life. But communities is one thing he talked about a great deal. And you can see it from a sociological point of view, how important it is. It's an interesting thing if you look at the life of Jesus, that he too must have talked about communities, although I don't remember anything in the Bible, in the Gospels in which he talks about it. But the fact that his disciples were immediately after his passing starting communities, as it says in the Acts of the Apostles, to me that means that they couldn't have done it unless Jesus had talked about it, as Master did. There are many things, as I wrote Revelations of Christ, I couldn't help thinking that Master could have been Jesus. He was the same type of person, same dynamic power, and yet humility. And I don't want you to quote me on that, because when I asked Master, were you Jesus Christ? His answer was, what difference would it make? So obviously it isn't the divine will that it be known. Nonetheless, I think it helps our devotion if we can understand how much of the personality is there. The soul is the same. God is in the same in everybody. So it doesn't really make a difference. But it is meaningful in a way to us Christians to think that what he brought was just the same as what Jesus brought. Communities was something he talked about. I talked to Daya about this in 1958, and I said, when are we going to start these communities? She said, frankly, I'm not interested. I have not seen in Daya the kind of spiritual advancement that people insist on seeing. I know that when Master was talking about his most advanced disciples, he mentioned Rajarshi, not Dr. Lewis, Oliver Black, and Sister Gyanamata. And he caught our thoughts because we all naturally, because Daya was in charge at Mount Washington, we all thought, well, what about her? And he caught our thoughts and he said, well, and Faye, well, she still has her life to live. But I've seen things in her that, well, I don't see wisdom in them. It doesn't matter. She's doing her best. But this was one thing that was very strong in Master, and she just wasn't interested. I say that this is something that we have corrected in that Master gave me this job. It's interesting that he never told me so. I think if he had told me so, my mind would have been going in different directions. I needed the experience of being thrown out and remaining still loyal. So I've never lost that loyalty. I'd never lost that love. But the communities were one of the most important things that he came to bring into the world. And I urge all of you to go out and try to found communities in time. We've talked about it, and my purpose today is not discussing how you can do it, but one very important thing is leadership. The most important thing in leadership is humility. Be in the self. Let God do it through you. Master, I remember that Herb Fried was going to Phoenix, and Master was giving him advice for how to be the minister there. And then he stopped for a moment, and he said, you have a great work to do. And I thought, because I was very nearsighted, I couldn't tell clearly whom he was looking at, although he was closer to me than you are, Jyotish, or you, Namdevi. And so I looked at Herbert with congratulations, and Master said, it's you I'm talking to, Walter. And from then on, he said this quite a few times, that you have a great work to do. Well, I never took that as a compliment. I always understood that it was a charge, that he insisted that I understand his mission, that I meditate on it and try to further it. One time he said to me out at the desert, he always said these things to me when we were alone, and people can take my word for it or not take my word for it. This too was when we were alone. He said, apart from St. Lin, every man has disappointed me, and you mustn't disappoint me. And he said it with such power that I vowed that I would not. I would do everything I could to help him. But I understood. He wasn't saying that men had disappointed him spiritually. He had great men disciples. But none of them understood the importance of his mission and how it can change the whole world. And after I was on my own, Master had told me, write books. And I had always thought in SRF, how can I ever write books? They'll never give me the time to write them. And how can I ever get them published? They'll never publish them. They're not even publishing his books. And when I was on my own, I didn't want to conflict. I always wanted to remain loyal and supportive. And so I thought of doing things that they had not done. And I realized Master had written a book on healing and on success. And I thought, well, if I can write ways in which his teachings apply to everybody in every field of life, in education, in marriage, in child rearing, in everything, in material success and all, that this would be a service to him. And for those reasons, I have written so many books. Now it's 91 books, and the count doesn't seem to be finished yet. I've tried not to disappoint him in that, but I've realized what he meant. There is a difference between men and women. It's something you can see sexually. Women's sexual organs are inside, men's are outside. The consciousness of men is more for conquering and doing things outwardly, and that of women is more receptive and thinking of how they can help their outwardly nurturing, which you see in their breasts. And all these things are symbols. You see in men this, what I call a Neanderthal ridge here. But women have different foreheads. You can see it in their skulls. They can tell whether a skull is of a woman or of a man just from the shape of the skull. There have to be differences, and there are differences, but you cannot call them qualitative differences. And that's the big mistake everybody makes. They're two sides of the same coin, and you can't say that one side has more value than the other. If it's 1 cent, it'll be 1 cent. If it's a pound, it'll be a pound. But it's the same for both. Each represent two aspects of human nature that together make for harmony and perfection. And I do think that men and women need each other. I do approve of the monastic life. And that's because people tend to slip into the wrong interpretation of the relation of the sexes. As long as it's sexual, it never will be understood. Each then will be egotistical, grabbing what he can for himself. But true love is self-giving. And when the Master never talked much about soulmates, but he did in one passage in one of the magazines, in the SRF magazine back in the 30s, he talked about Jesus and something that Jesus had said. And Master corroborated that true marriage is made in heaven, that there are such things as soulmates, but it cannot be a sexual relationship. It must be spiritual. But he said that you may meet your soulmate in a vision. That soulmate may be living on another planet. But there will be a union of these two which makes that possible. I cannot speak from that. I do not know. I do remember one time there was one disciple of Sri Yukteswar who was doing his best to be a brahmachari, but had a very hard time with it. And Sri Yukteswar said, God has a special gift to give you today. And they were sitting in a train, and there was another train parked, whatever you say, parked isn't the right word, stopped next to them. And he said, look over there. And there was a woman sitting in that compartment that somehow this man felt completely satisfied. He never had another desire. That train left. They never saw each other again. But everybody has this desire in his heart. And it will be filled when you give up this thought of what's in it for me and how can I get. Passion is not love. But when there is sincerely giving love, then if this idea of a soulmate is true, and I cannot completely persuade myself that it is, but if Master said that, he must have meant it, and therefore what can I say? And I do say, seek it in giving, not in receiving. As Jesus said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. One thing I noticed about Master was his humility. You think of him, and he was a great sage, but he never acted in such a way as to pontificate, lo, I tell you so and so. He rarely spoke with that firmness. Sometimes he did, but he was so humble and so childlike, and the more I tune into him, the more I realize that he's like a story he told of Ramakrishna, who one time they were operating on him for some little thing, and he was crying like a child. And another time, he was dancing in ecstasy, and he fell against a burning brazier, and there was a piece of coal burned into his back, and the disciples were horrified. He said, "What is it? There's a coal burning into your back. Oh, take it out." And he was just like a child. He didn't play any game of the great guru. He just was completely capable of saying, "Well, I was wrong then," or he never put himself above anybody, and that was his greatness. He was childlike in his simplicity. It was a wonderful quality. There were two prayers, he said. The greatest prayer, on the one hand, is, "I will reason, I will rule, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything." But another one time he said to us, "Pray to God this way, give me thyself, that I may give thee to all." That is the greatest prayer. And I saw this in him, and I feel that those who are truest disciples of Master are those who try to pass the baton, not those who hog it selfishly for themselves, but those who think, how can I share with other people the blessings I've received? Keep that thought in mind. All his teaching was directed toward giving up the ego. That was the essence of all of it. His teaching was individual, and some people he would tell this thing, and other people he would tell another thing, but always it was with this thought in mind that this is what this person needs to give up his ego. I needed to teach. I told him I didn't want to be a teacher. His only answer was not at all commiserating. He said, "That's what you've got to do, and you'd better learn to like it." But I came to understand over a time, because, it took me 7 years before I could persuade myself that it was even worthwhile teaching. I said, what's the use of just getting up and blowing? Nobody listens. It's my bad karma that I have to be in church here speaking to people while those other people can be back there meditating. It took me 7 years, believe it or not, to convince myself that there was anything worthwhile in teaching. And then I found that there were people who really were helped. Somebody had wanted to commit suicide, and after hearing me, gave up that thought. Somebody had been an atheist and suddenly believed in God. And things like this happened, and I realized that it is worthwhile teaching. But the most important thing that you can teach is through your vibrations. And the most important thing you can do in any work that you can do, put your vibrations into it. That will do more good than any particular technology or anything that you do. Keep that thought strongly in mind. One wonderful thing about Master was that I noticed he always left the last word with other people. He didn't insist. There was something in the Autobiography of a Yogi that you'll notice when he was talking about Mahatma Gandhi. He didn't believe completely in nonviolence. He believed in it as an inward attitude, yes. But he said there are times when you have to be violent. Krishna told Arjuna this. Sri Yukteswar taught Master that, and in that lesson on the mosquito. Remember when Master didn't want to kill the mosquito, and he said sometimes it's necessary to, it's a minor sin, but you have to do certain things for a higher motive. And yet when Mahatma Gandhi, he asked him this question, Mahatma Gandhi said that I would offer myself first. If somebody were to come to your village, for example, and shoot everybody up, what would you do? And Mahatma Gandhi said, well, I would offer myself up first. Well, what if the man shot you and went on to shoot everybody else? He didn't answer that question. It's not answerable except from the standpoint, as Master himself said. Gandhi was talking about nonviolence to the English, who were honorable people. They were gentlemen, as he put it. But with the Russians and the communists, you can't treat them that way. It would be like practicing nonviolence to a tiger and finding yourself in its stomach, practicing it there. You have to have that sufficient level of love before you can conquer somebody with love. Gandhi had it, but you can't expect everybody to have it. But when Gandhi said this to him, Master left the last word with him. I noticed him do that again and again, that he would leave the last word with other people. And so I always had to listen very carefully, because there was respect from. This is one of the wonderful things I saw in him, his respect for everybody. One time there was a group of Indians there, and one of them had been drinking too much, and he was very playful and sort of too familiar with Master and embracing him and so on. And Debbie, in Bengali, which this Indian didn't know, said something deprecating about his drunkenness. And Master very sternly said, "Don't." He was a child of God, and he saw him with respect as a child of God, not as that drunken fool. This kind of respect was something that, that story of one time he went into a hotel and he was dressed in his orange robe, and the man came up to him very drunk, and he said, "Hello there, Jesus Christ." They say in vino veritas. And Master said hello there, but he knew that he wanted to help this man to understand a higher state of conscience, so he gave him a touch of ecstasy. And the man said, "Say, well, what are you drinking?" And Master said, "I can just tell you this, that there's a lot of kick in it." But he had respect for him. He didn't put him down. He didn't laugh at him. He gave him something worthwhile. When people were sent to kill him, which happened once or twice at least that I know of, he would always see God in that person and win him through that love. That respect that he showed for all of us. We're nothing. We don't have anything compared to him, and yet he always showed respect. This is, I think, the most important aspect of love. The most important thing married couples can give one another is not love, which becomes selfish love and emotion, but respect. Respect will endure under all circumstances. Always have that little distance of respect for those who are closest to you. Human tendency is to sort of put down those who are closest to you. "Oh, old Don, yeah, Don't be like that. Have that respect for all of them. Master had that for us. And if he hadn't, I don't suppose I would be that way, because he taught me that. I could go on and on, I suppose, but I've written down and mentioned the few things that he said, and I've gone way beyond my time. But I think it's worthwhile to talk about these things, because I have to finish by saying that anything that is good in me, I have to attribute to him. If not in this life, in other lives. Because it's only through that example of purity, kindness, respect, egolessness, and desire to help other people. All these come through the grace of God, through the Guru. God's grace is there, but it's very few who actually receive it. They have to open themselves to him. And you can't open yourselves to him until you can get rid of that ego. It's his love that helps to open that ego and to see that I'm nothing, he's everything. When you've reached that point, then you know that he's ready to give you himself. And that's what he's come to do, is to give us himself that we may know God. Ultimately, your goal, and you don't have any choice in the matter, there's one thing you can't get away from, and that is who you are. You are a child of God. You can act like a child of Satan for millions and billions of years and for days of Brahma, but sooner or later you're going to have to wake up to that thought. So why not live it now? Why not just accept that Yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I'm stupid. And yes, I'm not very clever at anything. But I have this potential, and that is my God. Remember that story I told of this man in Australia who came to me after a lecture I'd given, and he said, well, what are you going to say to me? I'm an atheist. And what are you going to, I hear you keep using the word God. How are you going to define God for me? And I paused a moment and I said, why did you think of God as the highest potential you can imagine for yourself? He said, well, I can live with that. But this is the truth. You can't know what God is, but you can think of your own potential. And whatever that is, love that. That's who you are. You aren't those things that pull you down. The real battle is in the spine between those forces which try to lift you up and those which try to pull you down. And if you will adhere to the right side, bit by bit, everything else will be washed away. And you'll find yourself completely clean and pure and a child of God. And as I look at you all, I feel that you are all angels already. Master said that Divine Mother had told him, I sent you many bad ones to begin with, to test your love for me, but now I am sending you angels. And I feel that many of you are angels also. Live in that thought, affirm that thought. Don't say, oh, not me. Remember that story I wrote, The Golden Sun Man. It's a beautiful story, and I've recorded it for everybody for Christmas, and in Italian for the Italians. And every time the Sun Man appeared to her, when the sun struck her in the face, she looked away, thinking, I don't belong there. It was only when she understood she does belong in that land of golden sunshine, in that land of perfection, that is her native land. And this land where she had been told, you have your duty to fulfill here. What duty is there? All time, Sukadeva said, is wasted that is not spent seeking God. All the things that you consider your duty, when you're left just a puff of death and you're gone, where will all that duty be? There's only one duty we really have, and that is to know God. And when we've understood that and cling to that, it's not that big a job. It's really quite simple. It's just your own weight is pulling you down, your own specific gravity. Change that. Okay, God bless you all. It's wonderful to be with you all, and especially in celebrating this wonderful occasion.
Long I've called you my Lord, long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion. Offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come? Long I've called you, my Lord, long I've called you. Many
Thank you all.